Welcome, Jermaine Galloway, to the Sound Off. I'm so excited to have you.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me, Michelle. This is my first time, I think, on this one, I
I
believe.
think I think it is, yeah. And some of you are like, "Who's Jermaine Galloway?" He's the tall cop, so you may know him as the tall cop. Either or, right? You'll answer to both of those.
I will. Generally, no one calls me Jermaine because no one knows my name, so they all just call me Talk Up.
I
So that,
know.
that's what they all say.
I know. And it is a very appropriate name that you have earned for yourself. So any of you who have seen me standing beside Jermaine can attest. He is very much the tall cop. So we're so glad to have you on here, though. We've got lots to talk about today. But before we dig in, I'm going to challenge you to share with us, confess a little bit, share something that nobody knows about you. What is your superpower? What weird little party trick have you got up your sleeve that
Well,
helps you do
yeah,
you?
not a good singer, not a good dancer. There's a couple of them. One of the funny ones, depending on which side of the fence you're on, is this. If there is, because I travel a lot, I'm in airports all the time, I'm on the road all the time, restaurants, all the rest. If there is a family screaming, crying, throwing a fit baby, loud dude screaming on his cell phone, they seek me out. So and they sit right next to me. So I make all my effort that I can that when I'm on the road to just find the deepest, darkest corner and get away from everybody. And I usually sit back there and work or just have my me time because on the road so much, so I don't get a lot of peace and quiet. So just have my me time, maybe looking at social media or something. And I mean, there will be 25 rows between me and the next closest people, and they will come and sit one row away from me. It never fails. It's always me. And I look and my wife Jessica, she goes, "It's because everybody thinks you're safe. So you're the safe place. So
Mhm.
they all want to
Well,
be
it's
near
like
you."
you do have a very, I don't know, soothing, I got this kind of
Yeah.
presence. So I'm
Oh
just
yeah.
I'm gonna let you
Yeah. So,
I'm gonna let you
so
reframe it like that. Yeah, I'm with
yeah.
Jessica. Note to self, never travel with Jermaine. I got
No.
you.
No, ma'am.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Let's dig in. You have long been our go-to for all things substance abuse, drug trends, and everything in and around those topics. Let's start there. Let's define what are we talking about when we're talking about substances in schools?
Yeah. So that's a pretty wide array of an answer there, but really we can narrow it down to this stuff that your kids can get their hands on easily. You have a couple moving parts with substances in schools. Vapes, we'll start with that, is a true epidemic. We've never seen drug use like this in schools when you talk vapes. It has changed the dynamic, it's changed the numbers, it's changed our how we can respond to it, it's changed our policies, and it is still evolving, and it's going to be even more of a problem over the next few years. Of course, you're seeing increase in cannabis use, and part of that's tied to vapes because it's coming in vape form. You still do see alcohol. Some people, kind of forget about alcohol, which is
Yeah.
really your top entourage drug, travels with everything. You still do see alcohol in schools. We're starting to see more fentanyl in schools.
No.
Fentanyl and vapes, they're not on the same level as far as popularity, of course, and thank goodness. But we are seeing more fentanyl in schools also. And then that obviously you're going to see more depression with that. You're going to see more aggression with that. You're going to see more self-harm with that. We are seeing all those things. So it's pretty substantial because the numbers, and I'm not saying, I mean, one number matters, any number matters, but the numbers are starting to exceed the system. The sponge is
I would agree.
full. And
Yeah,
that's part of the problem right there.
I would agree. We talk a lot about prevention in terms of some of these violent behaviors, the aggression, all of that we're seeing, and that has squeezed our already very limited school-based mental health capacity well beyond its limits. And now you insert this, and it's just accelerated and it kind of exploded to a point where, as you said, that like the system just can't handle it.
Yeah.
Parents can't handle it. Community-based mental health supports can't handle it. So we're literally in a crisis. And I think you talked about vapes. I think about during my lifetime. We had pretty traditional prevention methods in place for substances in schools. So as a student, I remember well, but as a teacher, ever more so. And this introduction of this mechanism has changed everything. So I want to talk about that some more, because I think our school, it's kind of like turning the Titanic, right? At any time something disruptive like this happens in the school space, it takes schools a long time to, change course and make those adjustments. And this is one of those things that got out so far ahead of us that I think that's why we're having these capacity issues, and we're seeing the kind of cascade of additional consequences, the mental health, the depression, the anxiety, the aggression, all of those things that we're looking to stem off and help to intervene, so that we can prevent things like self-harm or mass violence, or some of those worst case scenarios. So let's talk about that disruption, if you will. Sometimes we talk about disruption in a really positive way, economically or whatever, but this has been one of the single most disruptive things in terms of, our kids' mental health and the safety, the climate in the school.
Yeah. So and I've told you this before, you cannot talk mental health and not talk substances, right? They go hand in hand. All of our mental health issues are not based off substances, to be fair. All of them are not, but many of them, substances are tied in, whether they are what is helping to cause the mental health issues, they are what are potentiating or spiking the mental health issues, or you have mental health issues and now you're medicating the mental health issues. I mean, so whether it's on the front end or the back end,
no, chicken and egg.
They're generally tied in. And one of the interesting parts is this: the substances, there's a couple things that I need, your listeners to really understand. It's not just the substances. We are starting younger, and we're starting with a more potent drug younger. So we didn't see drug use in 3rd and 4th grade before. We are now. Vapes have opened that door. And I did a class yesterday in Texas, and I explained to the group, I said, it's not just the vape. It's opening the door to substances. We are teaching kids at 9 years old that if you use a substance, it feels really good. They are opening their mind to, hey, this is a good euphoria. This is a good feeling to substances. Vapes are opening that door. Vapes are now your true gateway. It's not marijuana. You might still, your first substance might be a beer, but not your first ongoing substance use is not going to be alcohol. It's going to be vapes, especially at this age range we're talking about. So it's opening groups to, hey, this feels really good. When I use something, I feel good. When I have trauma in my home and I use something, I feel good. When I'm getting bullied at school and I use something, I feel good. It's teaching those kids those pathways that it feels really good. And that's a problem for us because we're teaching them younger, and we're going to see higher levels of addiction. And unfortunately, we already are.
So I know you're not a medical doctor, but we surround ourselves with a lot of people from all these different, disciplines that relate to school safety. So, we do have medical folks, mental health folks, trauma experts, child development experts in our bench and in our network. And that's one of the things that keeps a lot of them up at night. We're talking about a developing brain. So like, it's bad enough, to see 25-year-olds, getting hooked on all of these things and the consequences they're dealing with as a result. But when you talk about a 9-year-old brain, you talk about really young kids getting exposed to this gateway and what that does from that kind of addiction science piece. I mean, it's just staggering.
Well, and think about this. Yeah. So, they talk about the mental health side, obviously, and they talk about that brain development and starting younger. But what's interesting? We don't know a lot about these substances still. So we're talking based in some ways off past knowledge and past practice and what we know synthetics do to a brain, or what we know some other, cannabis and synthetics do to a brain, things like that. But here's the kicker. In some cases, not all, but in some cases, we're talking about the, let's say, light beer version of the drug. And today, your 8th graders are starting with the distilled spirits version of the drug. So it is the same drug, but it is not the same. It's the same name of the drug, but it's not the same drug. It's not the same potency. So what does this mean for long-term exposure? What does this mean if you're already suffering from depression, if you're already having suicidal thoughts, if you're already, self-harm, if you're already cutting? What does this mean for that when you're starting earlier? And what does the data say? And, and I tell my classes, I don't need to show you the data. Your common sense is going to answer that question for you. When the data comes out, you're not going to be surprised.
No.
The data, the data is not going to come out and say, hey, all of y'all were wrong and we overblew all this. And it really isn't a thing. We know the data is not going to say that. So when the data comes out, the only question is, how bad is it going to be? That's the only question that you really have to have right now, because it's going to be bad. And I tell my schools, and for all your listeners, it's going to get worse, and it's going to get significantly worse, not slightly, significantly. And part of that, we haven't got to this part, but part of that is this: we're lowering prices of drugs and making them more available. So it doesn't matter if it's apples, bananas, peanut butter, or drugs or heroin. It doesn't matter what it is. You lower the prices, you make it more available, more people use it.
So let's talk about that access piece there, right? Because that's one of the things that makes this so insidious, particularly with all youth, but now even with our very youngest, school age kiddos. The vape itself is like, I can tuck it in my pocket. When the teacher turns her back, I can use it. They won't see. There's really, not all that much evidence. It's easy for me to sneak into a corner, all of that. So that accessibility has been, as I said earlier, kind of disruptive. But now also just talking about price, right? So if it's easy for me to get my hands on, it's discreet, it's small, it's super cheap. It's not hard for me to access it. And that's like another, potential barrier to access would have been price. But as you said, that's all, all those gates are coming down here. And so that accessibility piece is a huge factor.
Yeah. So let's kind of walk through, because it's multifaceted. So first, here's what you have going on. Give you a little background. So an average vape, let's say 500 puffs. So if this is a writing pen, not a vape. So if this was my vape pen, you go, that's one puff. Okay. Back in about 2018, 2019, an average vape was about 500 puffs, somewhere in there. Okay. That vape would cost you $5 to $10. So let's make it simple. Let's say it was 1,000 puffs, $10. Okay. Today, I just saw one. I was in Alabama earlier this week and in Texas later this week. And I just saw a vape in Alabama, just to fast forward. It was 40,000 puffs for $19.99. Okay. So, which is the most I've seen. I saw it in Wyoming recently, now in Alabama. So we went from 1,000 puffs for $10 to 40,000 puffs for $20. So what this does for you is, one, if you had a puff and I said, okay, Michele, here's your vape. It only has 1,000 puffs to it. This needs to last you for 7 days, because you don't get your allowance till next week. So it's got to last you for 7 days. You're going to incrementally hit that vape, because you need this to last you, and you're feeding addiction. So you're not going to sit there and just rip off of it. You're going to hit it a little bit each day, but you need this thing to last you. And then when your friends come up to you and go, hey, Michele, we want to hit your vape. You go, no, I only have this much left. I can't share this with you. You can take one, but that's it. Now you fast forward to today, you have 40,000 hits. You're going to rip on that thing all day long. And when your two girlfriends want to hit off of it, you're going to hand it to them and let them rip off it all day long. And you say, hey, give me $2 or $3, because it was only 20. So give me $2 or $3 and I can go re-up next week or in a week and a half. So what you're going to do is you're going to increase your addiction. You're going to increase your tolerance, which means you're going to rip off it even more. And then at some point, when you get caught in school, caught by your parents, start having medical issues, and you have to stop, it's going to be not impossible, but for some kids, virtually impossible for them to stop and just stop cold turkey, because now they are knee deep in the addiction world. And this is what is happening right now. This is why I tell schools, it is not going to go down. There's no possible way, because addiction doesn't just stop and say, well, y'all changed your laws, so I better stop doing this. If that were the case, we would not be in a heroin epidemic, because many of your heroin users have been arrested. So consequences don't stop addiction. So that's part of the problem schools are up against, which means this: what ties into addiction? Mental health, your depression, your suicides, your aggression towards teachers, aggression towards parents, self-harm, lack of caring, lack of enthusiasm, all that ties into it. So this is why I tell them all that's going to rise, guys, because we're seeing the dosing rise as we're lowering prices to price kids into the market, which means these other issues are going to rise too. It's a simple prediction. It's an easy prediction. Yeah. And at some point, we got to turn the corner. We're just not there yet.
So, I think about what you just shared, that sort of scenario that you laid out, but it's not just affecting that one individual. It is, our kids are social. School is a social little society, right? So those companies who are putting forth this strategy, it's a short-term investment, right? To create not just one addict, but all of the other kids that are going to share on that vape, right? So now they're all in it, right? So we look at what are the economics behind how can they now put 40,000 puffs in this little 1999 vape that they're going to have potentially a lifelong addict customer here, um, as well as all of their peers that get hooked into it too.
Yep.
So I want to back up and have a little vocabulary lesson, if you will, on synthetics. You mentioned synthetics, and for some folks in my age range, we're like, what? What are you talking about? I like, what is this synthetic thing?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you're younger than me. So, but when you talk our age range, so a synthetic drug is a drug that's made by a chemist and comes out of a lab. So synthetics that you and I have heard of, ecstasy is a synthetic, LSD is a synthetic, fentanyl is a synthetic. So none of those have natural properties to them. Those were all made by chemists. Some of the chemists were in the United States who created them. Some of the chemists were not. So this is worldwide. Or you have a scenario where it was created in Russia or Germany or something like that, but now we're making our own. So it might have been originating somewhere else, but now our chemists are making our own. And in some cases, we're better than the original form of the drug is now too. So that's what a synthetic is. So, you talk heroin. Heroin's more of a semi-synthetic. It has some natural properties to it from the poppy plant, but then gets altered in a lab. But, synthetics in schools, to kind of ties back to schools, current ones, Delta 8, all the deltas, Delta 8, Delta 10, HHC, all that stuff, those synthetic forms of cannabis, and vapes. Your vapes are actually nicotine salts. Nicotine salts is a synthetic, it comes out of a lab. So that's why you're talking about such high levels of addiction with some of these substances. They're all lab-made drugs. Not to say plant-based stuff is weak. It is not. Right. But, our chemists are really good at what we do. So what they do. I'm not a chemist, so what they do. Yeah.
Exactly. So, let's talk about that whole piece, right? As we kind of turn the corner a little bit here. Our kids are not educated consumers. They're believing the marketing. They're like, I can get this at the corner store, the gas station. It's legal for me, or it's legal for my 18-year-old friend to get it for me, or whatever. So it must be okay, like it's not pot, it's not THC, it's this is it's not a drug, right?
Yeah. So here's the first part of that. Legal does not mean safe. I teach this to adults, not just kids. We have adults who think that also. Yeah. I have video interviews that I show people that have individuals talking about it's legal or it's a plant, so it's safe. Legal does not mean safe. Plant-based does not mean safe. To be clear, drugs are not safe, period. Most drugs have a side effect of some type, including ibuprofen. So, for no drug is safe for all the masses. All drugs have side effects. So with that in mind, you have to look at the drug by itself. When you think about legality means the city, county, or state chose to ban it, or feds chose to ban it. It doesn't mean that because they didn't ban it, it's safe. We have drugs like kratom. It's not safe at all. It works like heroin, and it's legal in 44 states. And, my 10-year-old daughter is at elementary school, could purchase kratom, right? In Texas and most states. So you have drugs like tianeptine, works like heroin, legal. You have, I could just rattle so many off. We have amanita, which is a mushroom that's very popular in schools right now. That is legal, and that works like psilocybin. It works like a hallucinogen. We have so many. So legal doesn't mean safe. In some cases, it's just not on anybody's radar. Or it is on their radar, and maybe there's politics involved. I don't know. I'm not behind the scenes on that, but I just know that we're not banning a lot of this stuff.
And so I think, you really, as we start to think about like solutions here and how we're gonna face this, how we're gonna support our kids and try as much as possible to be prevention oriented. Unfortunately, we know we're going to have to be response oriented. So I want to talk about how we're going to respond when we have kids in like literal medical crisis or mental health crisis. But let's start with the prevention piece. So obviously, I'm always going to be super biased as a teacher. It's about education, right? The parents need to know, the students need to know. This needs to be part of our health curriculum. What things are you seeing that are working to give our kids a fighting chance here?
Yeah.
Up against some of these.
So a couple things. One is sticking with it. Let me kind of give you a story here first, is sticking with it. And here's what I mean by that. Not just suspending the kid. Our old way of doing things was kind of like, it was old law enforcement thinking. Old law enforcement thinking, I mean, very old law enforcement thinking, was we arrest the person, problem goes away. So no, we learned after you became a police officer, you arrest the person, problem goes to jail for 3 hours, problem comes out of jail, and problem's right back there again. That's what we quickly, every law enforcement officer in the country knows this now.
Yeah.
That's what we quickly learn. And what we're learning in schools is you suspend them, you suspend the problem for however many days, let's say 4-day suspension. They're suspended at home to go have more sex and use more drugs because the parents are at work and there's no supervision now and there's no positive influences, because in some cases the parents are the negative influence. So now we're sending them back to a horrible environment, or an environment that is totally unsupervised, to go do more of what they were doing and then come back 4 days later with the same issues, if not more. So I come from a law enforcement background. I support suspensions, to be clear, but suspensions are not the tool. They are a tool. Yeah. And with that being said, if we can do suspensions on campus under supervision and then have your education, prevention, more time for schoolwork, whatever. And what you'll find is many of the kids are happy to be there because they're in a very nice static environment, and it's the most calm environment they have in their lives. So we have to look at some other alternatives. And to be fair to schools are understaffed already. We're seeing that, teachers are quitting, counselors are quitting, admin's quitting. I get it. So schools are understaffed. Some schools don't have the budget to have somebody, paraprofessional there all day. I get the logistical side. A perfect world, you want to say, you guys need to do A, B, and C. I get for some people, they simply can't do that. But we have to look at some other ways. We can't just suspend the problem home. I mean, when I see that, I'm like, So
we're never going to punish our way into prevention, right? We're never
worked for any drug and never will. Never will. To give you an idea, on the adult side, something that has become very popular, that I speak out a lot, is drug courts or substance use courts. So we have courts that are specific now, depending on the city and state you're in, to veterans, to DWIs, to domestic violence, to very specific drugs. So when you get caught, you go into drug court, which the prosecutor, the defense attorney, the judge, the probation officer, the counselor are all working as a team to help you. So the people that you think that are, prosecutor, DA are fighting, no, they're not. They're working, they're communicating. They're working together. And when you graduate drug court, we expunge everything off your record. We need schools to look more into something like that. Sometimes schools like to be in their silos and they don't want to share information. And I get that they can't. You're talking kids and, sometimes parents, but many of the parents, if their kids would not have substance use issues, would sign off on schools sharing information with counselors and doctors and all that. They would happily do it to get out of this mess that they see that their child is in. We need schools to be a little more open to that. And to be fair, we got to be fair to schools. I know schools didn't sign up for this. When you signed up to be a teacher, you didn't go say, I want to be a substance use disorder counselor. You said, I want to be a teacher. I want to educate kids. You didn't sign up for it, but sorry, schools, it's the sandwich. You know what type of sandwich I'm talking about that you've been handed. So sorry.
Yeah. No, it's the absolute truth. And I don't even get to teach reading or writing or science or any of the good stuff until we get a handle on this. So it's like, it's the sandwich. It's the sandwich.
It's the sandwich.
Tweeted so beautifully, though, why zero tolerance will never work. Has proven to be harmful for every application that we see in schools, but ever more so here in this topic. It is absolutely not the way for us to go. It's the way for us to make it worse, right?
Correct.
So this idea of surrounding a student with support and intervention, bringing the family in. This is where we're going across the board in school safety. So if it's threatening behaviors, if it's mental health crisis, whatever the challenges are, and now unfortunately a lot of them are substance abuse related in some way, it's about solving for that situation with that student. And it's going to take a team. It's going to take a
Right.
team. Yeah.
Exactly. Labor intensive, but we'll see more success stories. Drug courts are working. They're working for all different types. That's why now we see the Veterans Court, because you need people trained to specifically work with these issues. We can't just broad brush all the issues, right? And that's what we're seeing, and they're working and they're successful. And we have people who are graduating, and graduating is a big deal to many of those people. That is a big deal. That's a big turn. It's one of the first achievements they've had in their life where they actually felt good and people congratulated them. And I mean, so we have to just kind of change the way we're doing things a little bit. And I see schools open to that. A lot of schools are asking me, it's a question I get in almost all my school trainings. What can we do? They are asking. I think they get that, hey, what we're doing ain't working, but we don't really have an idea of what to do. So,
yeah, we need a whole new tool belt, to be honest with you. None of the tools that we had in place before for, negative behaviors, disruptions, discipline, none of that is going to apply here in this day and age, because all of these things that we are seeing are, it's going to take that whole community, whole child approach, which it's a different way of doing business, but it's the only way. It's what we've got. So
yes,
like you said, labor intensive, but we will and are seeing good results from that. So it's out of the box, thinking creatively. Okay, so I'm going to challenge you here. How do you talk to your kids? Because you got school age kids.
I do.
And so knowing what you know, and understanding full well the consequences of just, even one or two hits of that vape, right? Like, how do you talk to your kids? These beautiful little people with no frontal lobe, right?
Yes.
Who are so susceptible.
Yes. So I have a 6th grader and a 4th grader. And this is what's kind of funny. So my 6th grader's name is Jordan. When Jordan was in, I want to say 4th grade. Yeah. 3rd grade going into 4th. I remember it was that summer. So I tell Jordan, I say, someone's going to offer you a vape. Be prepared for it. We're seeing in elementaries. And he knew what vapes were. I mean, he hears us talking about it, all the rest. I don't sit down and give my kids a training. I've never done that. But they see daddy working and all the rest. So, and kids, they hear everything you're saying. So I said, someone's going to offer you a vape. Be prepared. This is some ways you want to handle it. What do you think you can do? I want him to use his tool belt, because I'm more social than he is. So his way of responding might not be the same way I would respond to things. So I have to let him use what's in his tool belt. So anyway, so we go on, fast forward about 6 months. He comes home one day, and my wife and I looked at each other and laughed. We still get a crazy laugh out of this. He comes home one day and he goes, Dad. I'm like, yeah, what's up, buddy? And he goes, no one has offered me a vape yet. No one has offered me a vape. And he's frustrated.
Really disappointed here.
It's almost like we've been practicing all summer for this, and I'm not able to use it yet. He was completely frustrated, right? And he was dead serious. And I go, buddy, it's okay. It's going to happen, right? This is going to happen. It's all right. We're ready for when it does. But I told my wife, I said, at least he's comfortable and like, hey, bringing it to us. So then now fast forward to last summer, my daughter, like I said, just went to 4th grade. She has another friend that she plays with. The friend's been at our house. We know the parents, great people, all the rest, right? One of those things. So we hang out with the parents. It's all great. So she's playing at that friend's house, who just lives right down the road from us. So that friend has older siblings, and the older siblings were upstairs in the game. I guess they have a game room, playroom, something like that upstairs. Older siblings were upstairs, like video games, whatever. Well, they leave. They all jump in a car, and high school age kids, they all leave. So then our girls go upstairs into the playroom now, because the older siblings are gone. I guess there's vapes everywhere. There's vape pens laying out everywhere. They've been vaping, all the rest. So our daughter, who is part of these conversations, you can talk to us about it. You're going to see it. This is what it is. This is why you don't want to do it. All these things. Our daughter comes right home and tells us. So she walks right in the door and goes, Mommy, Daddy, there were vapes at the house. And so we're kind of like, wait, what? Because first we're thinking, her friend. We're like, wait, what? So she goes, yeah. She tells us the older siblings were upstairs. We went upstairs, there were vapes. So then we just calmly said, well, what did you do? Well, we went downstairs and told their mom. So, okay. So, I mean, and my daughter wasn't freaked out. She wasn't nervous to tell us. She wasn't like, oh my gosh, I'm going to get in trouble. She was like, no, we've talked about this, and now we're starting to get more in that cannabis conversation. That'll be moving forward a little more. We do talk alcohol already, and then we're going to start talking some other stuff. So we're about to get in that because now, my sixth grader here in Texas, he's in middle school now. So he's around seventh and eighth graders too. So we're going to have to start having that conversation. School does a good part to keep them separated right now, but eighth graders know a lot of what high school kids know. Sixth graders know a lot of what elementary kids know, but they're all on the same campus. So, and riding the same school bus. So with that, we're going to have to start, a little bit more. We're about there. This, Christmas time's coming up here. There'll be more conversation. So and my philosophy here, to answer your question, we do frequent conversations. I don't believe in the sit down dinner table. Let's turn the lights down. Let's put on a little aromatherapy candle, make it all awkward. I don't believe in that. Right. I believe just the opportunities. Yeah, the opportunities. We're in the car. We're going to school. We're waiting for the school bus. Guy driving the school bus. We're waiting for the school bus. Those are my opportunities. That's when we talk about stuff. When you see something, that's when we talk about stuff.
Yeah. It's just we're just having this conversation, hey buddy, what's going on? And it's part of I love the car conversations. You probably heard me talk about this, but it's like such a great environment to talk about really awkward things because nobody has to look at anybody. Like I'm driving.
Good point. Good point.
And so like we cover some ground in the car,
Yeah. That's funny. I never thought about like you don't have to look at each other. Yeah, because it's not weird, right? You're just like, oh, we're just having a conversation.
It's like child psychology. But I love the it's not a snake. The vape is not like you saw it and you came and you told me, and that's great. And I didn't have a big reaction. Our kids are watching us. And so if you act like, oh my gosh, and you like cancel your friends, that never going over to that house or blah, 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 blah. Instead, we have another conversation, and it becomes a teachable moment and hopefully we're reinforcing all those tools in the tool belt. So
yeah, we have to prep them. I mean, our kids are going to have a friend who does some type of drug. You just play the numbers. I mean, good kids do drugs. Not so good kids do drugs. Yes. Kids who are struggling do drugs. Kids who are valedictorian do drugs. I mean, there is no one stereotype of someone who uses substances. So you're going to have that great kid or, your daughter's dating somebody or whatever, and they're using and you don't realize it because excellent 4.0, blah, 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 going to Harvard, whatever. I don't know. So you got to be prepared for that. You got to prepare your kids that this stuff is coming because there's no way around it. I mean, if you look at the vape numbers and substance use numbers on high school campuses and now middle school campuses and even now elementary school campuses, those numbers are rising. Those numbers are rising. So there's no way that you're going to be able to hide your child from it. Those days are over unless you homeschool and they never leave, which I don't suggest because that causes some other issues. Wow. But if, some other social issues. But unless you do that, you can't hide it. You can't hide them from it. So, and if they have a cell phone, you really can't hide them from it. So, yeah.
So it's all about building up that tool belt, and let's start early. I love how you started early with your kids, and it's often. So it's just a constant conversation that's going on. It's not, I love how you said, it's not just this like, we're going to sit down and have the talk,
And it's going to flush out some other stuff too. You're going to start with drugs and end up talking about sex, bullying, or, keying cars. I mean, it's going to end up with other stuff. You're like, oh, and then, I tell some parents, you might just have to take a night, think about it, and respond the next day. Let me get back to you on that. just like we have on conference calls. Let me get back to you on that. Right. So
do not respond right then and there. Like take it in, keep your game face, take a beat, go talk to your spouse, go talk to your colleagues, your friends, whatever, process, and then come back.
Come back. So I want to, circle back around to what we talked about. So
Exactly. Oh my goodness. Okay. So can we talk for a little bit about policy too? Because a lot of our listeners are school administrators, SROs, teachers. Whenever we're faced with a new challenge in school safety, one of the things that we point to is, okay, you're going to confront this. You're going to know it's not a good thing. But unless you have a plan beforehand and unless you have a policy to fall back on and say, well, Mrs. Galloway, this is what we're going to do, right? We've bumped up against this. You and your child signed the handbook. And so here's how we're going to handle this. Unless you have those things in place, you are utterly flat-footed, and there is very little that you can do but make it up on the fly. And we all know that's not going to be very successful. So let's talk a little bit about some of those policy recommendations that you have for our schools, because they're going to face, I mean, it's silly to even say that. They are facing this vape crisis in all the way down to elementary school. So what are some of the policies that you are seeing that are actually helpful here?
Okay, so yeah, and starting out, touching on what one of the things you just mentioned is this. You don't want to be caught flat-footed, because when you talk substances, here's what happens. Number one, when you don't have something in policy and you're out of policies, that causes lawsuits. So there's that, or threatening of lawsuits.
Huge.
There's that issue. But also, if you try to formulate a policy after the fact, when you talk substances, then all of a sudden that policy is based on Michele, and Michelle's parents are pissed. So you're doing that to call out my daughter. I mean, my daughter tells me every kid on campus is doing this, but you're calling my kid out. Yes. So you need to have the policy, we've talked about what's coming your way. So we need to have the policy made now when there is no name attached to it. Just like you said, when they sign the handbook and say, well, we're not calling Michele out. This is actually the policy that Michele violated. And it's clear cut. So here's a couple things that you need to have in your policy, or that you should have. And I tell people, full transparency, I am not an attorney. I'm not a policy guy. So you're going to need to talk to the attorney who represents your district, and you're going to have to talk with the superintendent. You guys are all going to have to get together. I can give you some recommendations, and y'all know how to put all that stuff together in the official policy way. That's not me. But one of the things you need to look at is legal substances. We kind of touched on that earlier. Some schools will run into issues where they use the word illegal or controlled substance. Yes. Well, guess what? In many areas, Delta 8 is not considered illegal or controlled. Amanita is not illegal or controlled. Kratom is not illegal or controlled. Tianeptine is not. I mean, I could do this all day. Okay. Yeah. So many of those are not illegal or controlled. So you're telling me that if that's the only wording you're using, that it's okay for them to have that? So, and everyone's like, no. Well, you got to understand, again, legal doesn't mean safe, but you got to understand also you need to have some other terminology. Mind-altering substance, which you're gonna have to tighten that up a little bit, because pretty much every drug is a mind-altering substance. Stuff that you take in the morning or you take for headaches, you can consider mind-altering substances. So you mind-altering substance used to get high, large quantities to get high, things like that. There's some other things you can look at. For instance, you take one Benadryl, you might have allergies. You take 20 Benadryl, it's so you can hallucinate. So why would you have 20 Benadryl on campus? So there's things like that to look at also, and then to have in the handbook and to make early. Another thing we talked about was the suspension piece. The handbook says caught vape, 1-day suspension, second offense, 4-day suspension, third offense expelled. No, come on guys, we got to back off that. So again, you want to have on-campus suspension with education, with a class. And then what about incentivizing things? So schools cannot make parents put their kids in treatment, but what your kids need is treatment. But you can't force it. You can incentivize it though. So you can say, we will expunge A, B, and C if you put your daughter in treatment. She completes this, and we get, and again, that goes back to that drug court philosophy. You're working together as a team. You're working with a treatment provider, or just a standard way of working with treatment providers. So you're not sending them to one, because sometimes there's conflict of interest there. But something like that too, because schools say, well, we can't force them. I say, you can incentivize things. You can look back and say, what power do you have on campus? We will not suspend your son, or we will not kick him off the football team, which again, now gives him more free time to use more drugs. We will not kick him off the football team if you send him to treatment. And if he's actively going to treatment, he can continue to play. So the kid will be like, I'll go to treatment. The parent will be like, you're going to go to treatment. And everybody's game for it. So you have to look at some things like that. And even though, let's say at the end of the season, the parent might say, well, we're just going to do this to appease the school and pull you out. But then the parents start seeing positive results, right? We just want to get them there. And I learned this a lot in my law enforcement days. I would arrest somebody and they would sit back and think it's the worst day of their life. But then what would happen is, because of the arrest, the judge would say, you have to go see a counselor, you have to go to this. And now it completely switched. So we forced them to get help. They wouldn't have got help otherwise, but now they're getting help and they go, I really feel better about my life. I feel better about myself. I'm not as depressed. I'm not using substances to self-medicate. So sometimes it's just getting them in the door. And once they're in the door, they actually feel good about it. And then they go, okay, I'm good. And then the schools are like, we're all good here. So you have to just look at some alternative ways, some alternative things, some creative ways, again, within budget, within your policy, within your laws, within what your prosecutor will work with, all that. So, I know there's more it's not a perfect world. There's more logistical things you have to deal with, but those are some suggestions I give people.
Okay, those are good ones. Because the purpose of this conversation is not to just, shock and awe, gloom and doom, and then leave people. You've given us a lot of hope. You've given us a lot of strategies. And there are, I would say, as an educator, we have a lot of intervention processes in schools, special ed, behaviors, any number of different things that we put in place for our students. Multi-tiered systems of support is something we talk a lot about. And this is the same, it's just a different issue. So we can lay those interventions and that very forward thinking approach on top of substance abuse as well. So especially though, thank you for the policy ideas, because we can do nothing without policy. We need those policies formed before kiddos come to school. And I love your point about it needs to be, it can't be singling anybody out. It can't be that this policy was just, created in order to catch this or penalize this one particular student. So this is your chance now, Jermaine, to sound off. If there is one thing you want us to take away, to do,
Sure.
In terms of substances in schools, there's a lot. We've talked about a lot. We could probably talk for 5 more days or more. But what is the one thing you want our listeners who are SROs, school psychs, school counselors, social workers, bus drivers, teachers, administrators, we're all on this. So what do you want us to know? What do you want us to do?
So there's a couple things I want you to know. One is, don't go with the head in the sand approach, because the numbers are getting overwhelming, and I get that. And here's one thing I fear. I'm not seeing it a lot, but you're starting to hear some whispers. One of the things I fear is this: screw it, we're done. Take the vape, send them back to class. Take the marijuana pipes, send them back to class. We don't have time for this. We're overwhelmed. This is my 10th one today. Not my problem. Okay? You can't do that, because addiction, and that's what you're dealing with, schools, even though, again, I know you did not sign up for this. Addiction is going to rear its head in other ways. So if you are doing that and you are continuing the addiction, then don't be shocked when a student assaults another one. A student has self-harm. Your suicide numbers go up. Your depression numbers go up. You cannot be shocked by that if you just put your head in the sand, because they are all directly associated. It'd be like me stopping a drunk driver going, man, I've been going all night. Hey, I'm taking your keys, walk home. They're going to drive drunk again the next day. And when they kill a family, I should not be shocked by that. Okay. So understand, I know it's hard. I know it's not easy, but do not put your head in the sand and do not just give up and say, forget it. This is not my problem. I did not sign up for this. I know you didn't sign up for it, but in many cases, your kids, you're the only positive influence in their life. And in some cases, they have other positive influences, but you're the most knowledgeable positive influence in their life when you talk substances. So don't put your head in the sand. That's the first thing. Second part is this. Don't just give up. Most of our kids don't use drugs. So I know it's frustrating. You're on this podcast because you want to learn from someone who's going to talk to you about drugs. If you didn't want to learn that, you probably wouldn't be sitting here today. So with that in mind, most of our kids don't use drugs. Some of our kids might have tried something and say, not for me. But most don't use. Thank goodness, because you imagine what those numbers would look like if they did. Most don't use, but the ones who do use are using at a pretty alarming rate and are using a pretty alarming substance and are starting at a much younger age. So my point is, the ones who are using, we got some problems going on. There's some dangers and there's some things that are pretty alarming there, but most don't. So don't just get frustrated and be like, everybody's using drugs, the world's ending. No, they're not. Most of the kids you're talking to are not. And that's why you have kids who are telling you, this kid's doing this is doing that. I didn't want to do that. That's why you have kids who are sharing information with you. So build a rapport with them, continue to grab that information that they are sharing with you. So not to then catch kids and suspend kids, but to educate and then also tailor your education towards the problems on your campuses. That's a couple things I'd share with you.
Amen. And we can find you where, so we can stay current and continue to learn.
Go to my website, Tall Cop Says Stop. It's a couple different ways. Tall Cop Says Stop is my website. So if you ever forget how to get a hold of me, because you're not going to remember my name, so just go to Tall Cop, Google search that. You can also, I'm on Spotify and Apple. I do podcasts also on drugs. So I focus on a drug topic. So I have about 25 podcasts out there on a very specific drug topic. So you can go through there, Tall Cop, Spotify, or Apple. But also you can sign up for my email list through my website too, where you'll see, just click, the box will be checked for email list, and you'll get updates from me about once a month on drug trends. So those are some ways you can do that.
Thank you. This has been an incredibly enlightening and actually hopeful conversation. So, folks, reach out, visit Jermaine at Tall Cop and continue the conversation. And don't give up on our kids. It's been the Sound Off with Jermaine Galloway, the Tall Cop.